what would have happened to Catherine, but ultimately she lost her mind as a result of it. Terrible shock to her. It's a very rough experience to encounter proof of these kinds.
Mr. Dodd, what kind, well, can you summarize the opposition to the committee, the Reese Committee, and particularly the efforts to sabotage the committee?
Well, they began right at the start of the work of an operating staff, Mr. Griffin, and it began on the day in which the committee met for the purpose of consenting to or confirming my appointment to the position of Director of Research. Thanks to the abstention of the minority members of the committee, that is the 2 Democratic members, from voting, why technically I was unanimously appointed. And
well, wasn't the White House involved in opposition to the committee?
Well, not at this particular point, sir. Mr. Reese ordered counsel and myself to visit Wayne Hayes. And Wayne Hayes was the ranking minority member of the committee as a Democrat. So we, counsel and I, had to go down to Mr. Hayes' office, which we did. Mr. Hayes greeted us with the flat statement directed primarily to me, which was that I am opposed to this investigation. I regard it as nothing but an effort on the part of Carol Reese to gain a little prominence, and so I'll do everything I can to see that it fails. Well, I am kind of a strange personality in the sense that a challenge of that nature interests me. Our counsel withdrew. He went over and sat on a couch on Mr. Reese's office and pouted. But I sort of took up this statement of Hayes as a challenge and set myself the goal of winning him over to our point of view. And I started by noticing on his desk that there was a book. And the book was of the type that there are many in these days that would be complaining about the spread of communism in Hungary, or that type of book. And this meant to me that at least Hayes read a book. And so I brought up the subject of the spread of the influence of the Soviet world, and for 2 hours discussed this with Hayes, and finally ended up with his rising from his desk and saying, Norm, if you will carry this investigation toward the goal as you've outlined it to me, I'll be your biggest supporter. I said, Mr. Hayes, I can assure you that I will not double-cross you. Subsequently, Mr. Hayes sent word to me that he was in the Bethesda hospital with an attack of ulcers, but would I come and see him, which I did. He then said, Norm, the only reason I've asked you to come out here is I just want to hear you say again, you will not double-cross me. I gave him that assurance, and that was the basis of our relationship. Meantime, counsel took the attitude expressed in these words, Norm, if you want to waste your time with this guy, as he called him, you can go ahead and do it, but don't ever ask me to say anything to him under any condition on any subject. So, in a sense, that cleared the decks for me to operate in relation to Hayes on my own. And as time passed, Hayes offered friendship, which I hesitated to accept because of his vulgarity. And I didn't want to get mixed up with him socially under any condition. Well, that was our relationship for about 3 months, and then eventually I had occasion to add to my staff, and as a result of adding to my staff a top flight intelligence officer, both the Republican National Committee and the White House were resorted to stop me from continuing this investigation in the direction that Carol Reese had personally asked me to do, which was to utilize this investigation, Mr. Griffin, to uncover the fact that this country had been the victim of a conspiracy.
Conspiracy, again, meaning that people get together and make a plot to carry out a mission, whatever their mission may be. Once again, back when Kennedy was assassinated, they had a committee come together, and the committee decided that indeed JFK was the victim of a conspiracy. They just couldn't figure out exactly who all was in on the conspiracy. Hey, the rabbit hole runs deep. The deeper the rabbit hole, the less likely people are to jump down it and see what's in that rabbit hole. Because it indeed may be difficult to connect the dots. But the point of the matter again being is that that's what they concluded. Not me, our own government. But yet, when there's evidence out here for us to all look at, sit down, and be analytical about information and the people who put information in front of us, it doesn't have to be crazy for us to believe in a conspiracy if it makes sense due to the information you're looking at. All right, we need information. Sometimes conspiracies are too deep to really jump down. I jump down a lot of them, but I come out with decent information in the end that I'm satisfied with. I will go more into what these conspiracies look like, including Iran-Contra. Like I've said before, Iran-Contra was pretty deep, with Oliver North saying we desired to have our own government that we didn't have to answer to Congress to. And he admitted that, to our own government. So that's two conspiracies, JFK and Oliver North, meaning people planned together and made something happen. Whatever that something may be. JFK's death and Iran-Contra, it was the fact that we sold arms to Iran and then we used the money for the arms, aka weapons, that we sold to Iran to give money to the Contras so we could fund the Contras. And from there, all hell kind of breaks loose because I'll go off into what other parts of Iran-Contra were, including the selling of drugs and allowing drugs and cocaine to come into America. All right? Another conspiracy is MK Ultra, the MK Ultra program. You can look it up. MK Naomi, MK Ultra, Operation Mockingbird. Go look all those things up. And you'll find out that those things are true. Go look up the Phoenix program. Things that they kept under wraps until it was absolutely known that those things had gotten to the public and they were indeed true. And at a certain point, the public couldn't deny that certain things had become true. And you just can't look down upon those who say that the conspiracy is real, meaning people have made plans under your nose. They pulled the wool over your eyes to make you think that they weren't doing something that they were indeed doing. Okay? Conspiracies are real. Conspiracy meaning people plan and plot to make things happen.
That was Mr. Reese's conviction. I eventually agreed to carry it out. I explained to Mr. Reese that his own counsel wouldn't go in that direction. He gave me permission to disregard our own counsel. And I had then to set up an aspect of the investigation outside of our office, more or less secret. And the Republican National Committee got wind of what I was doing, and they did everything they could to stop me. They appealed to counsel to stop me, and finally they resorted to the White House.
Was their objection because of what you were doing, or because of the fact that you were doing it outside of the official auspices of the committee?
No, their objection was, as they put it, my devotion to what they call anti-Semitism. That was a cooked-up idea, but in other words, it wasn't true at all. But anyway, that's the way I expressed it. And
Excuse me, why
and
did
they made it stick.
Why did they do that? How could they say that?
Well, they could say it, Mr. Griffin, but they had to have something in the way of a rationalization of their decision to do everything they could to stop the completion of this investigation in the direction that it was moving, which would have been an exposure of this Carnegie Endowment story and the Ford Foundation and the Guggenheim and the Rockefeller Foundation, all working in harmony toward the control of education in the United States. Well, in any event, to secure the help of the White House in the picture, they assigned, they got the White House to cause the liaison personality between the White House and the Hill, a major person, to go up to Hayes and try to get him to, as it were, actively oppose what the investigation was engaged in. And Hayes very kindly then would listen to this visit from Major Person. Then he would call me and say, Norm, come up to my office. I have a good deal to tell you. I would go up. He'd tell me, I've just had a visit from Major Person, and he wants me to break up this investigation. So I then say, well, Wayne, what did you do? What did you say to him? He said, I just told him to get the hell out. And he did that 3 times, and I got pretty proud of him in the sense that he was, as it were, backing me up. And we finally embarked upon hearings at Hayes' request because he wanted to get them out of the way before he went abroad in the summer.
I'll go further into what the committee talked about, and Mr. Hayes and Dodd and Casey, Catherine Casey, and the foundations, and how the foundations, that they really wanted to be able to investigate themselves. But, you know, imagine the police knock at your door. Coom, 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 coom. Police, open up. And they tell you that, you know, they want to investigate you and you're under arrest for whatever reason. And you say, hey, wait a minute, officer, would you allow me to investigate my own home, and I'll be willing to tell you what I find. Well, if you're really in trouble, are you really going to tell the police everything you find? Especially if once you give your piece of the story, they can't refute it because they weren't ever allowed to investigate. Can you imagine that? It's like the FBI, the CIA, you know, saying we'll investigate ourselves. And there are groups within police departments and the CIA and FBI called internal affairs that do internal investigations and try and make sure, you know, things are pretty tidy. However far that goes, you know, when you're relying on people who work for that organization to keep it 100% clean. Hey, speaking of clean, you know, if you work in certain industries, you understand people will work hard to hide stuff if it's inappropriate at the time and will damage their business. People hide stuff all the time. So I'm really talking about how often will people hide things that they really don't want you to know that could damage their efforts to move their business venture forward. These are just people after all. You know, some of them are pretty smart, allegedly pretty smart. And I'm not sure how far, we trust the average person to tell the truth consistently about what their true motives are. Scripture says, by their fruits you shall know them. Well, I'd like to investigate their fruits, like I showed y'all. Carol Reese said in the preface to Foundations, Their Power and Influence, they wanted to investigate foundations to make sure that they were doing the things that came out of their mouth, not just taking those things that came out of their mouth as word, meaning the truth. So, we should be careful out here. There are many, many things to watch out for.
And
But why were the hearings finally terminated? What happened to the committee?
what happened to the committee or the
Or
hearing?
the hearings? The hearings.
Oh, the hearings were terminated. Carol Reese was up against such a furor as Hayes through the activity of our own counsel. Hayes became convinced that he was being double-crossed, and he put on a show in a public hearing room, Mr. Griffin, that was an absolute disgrace. And he called Carol Reese publicly every name in the book, and Mr. Reese took this as proof that he couldn't continue the hearings. He actually invited me to accompany him when he went down to Hayes' office, and in my presence, with the tears rolling down his face, Hayes apologized to Carol Reese for every done and his conduct, and apologized to me. And I thought that would be enough and Carol would resume. But he never did.
The charge of anti-Semitism is kind of intriguing to me. What was the basis of that charge?
That
Was there
charge,
any basis for it at all?
no, the basis that the Republican National Committee used was that the intelligence officer I'd taken on my staff, when I oriented this investigation to the exposure of and proof of a conspiracy, was known to have a book, and the book was deemed to be anti-Semitic. This was childish, but this was the second in command of the Republican National Committee, and he told me I would have to dismiss this person from my staff.
Who was that person, sir? Who was that person?
The person?
Yes.
A Colonel Lee Lorraine.
Lee Lorraine.
Yeah.
And what was his book, do you recall? The title of his book?
The book they referred to was called Waters Flowing Eastward, which was a very castigation of the Jewish influence in the world.
I've done a quick review, as in I looked at pages of Waters Flowing Eastward to determine if it was actually anti-Semitic, as in talking trash or degrading Jewish people. That subject is a huge subject, and I will get into the aspects of being Jewish and or following Jesus. Or how about being Hebrew and Israelite, and or where the word Jewish comes from. Or how about where Jews claim to read the Talmud? That's Talmud. That's not the Torah, which is the first 6 books of the Bible. That's spelled Torah. We should be diligent in researching the things that are about the Talmud and about the Torah and who claims to be attached to which book. Because for my money, if we're talking about Hebrews and Israelites, they would never claim to be Jewish. At least not in today's day and time. The reason that they claim to be Hebrew or Israelite, and I'm not talking about black Hebrew Israelites, but just in general, Hebrews and Israelites understand that they come from Jesus, the line of Jesus, and they're about what he's talking about. People that are involved in the Talmud, they don't care about Jesus. In fact, they believe Jesus is in hell, boiling in hot excrement. It's been said Hitler got his hands on the protocols of the wise men of Zion. And that's why Hitler was against the Jews. Hey, but I've talked enough already. I'll go off into those subjects in my epilogue. All right? Tune in.
What were some of the other charges made by Mr. Hayes against Mr. Reese?
Oh, just that Mr. Reese was utilizing this investigation for his own prominence inside the House of Representatives. That was the only charge Hayes could think of.
How would you describe the motivation of the people who created the foundations, the big foundations in the very beginning? What is or what was their motivation?
Their motivation, well, let's take Mr. Carnegie as an example. His publicly declared and steadfast interest was to counteract the departure of the colonies from Great Britain. He was devoted to just putting the pieces back together again.
Would that have required the collectivism that they were dedicated to?
No. These policies or the foundation's allegiance to these un-American concepts are all traceable to the transfer of the funds over into the hands of trustees, Mr. Griffin. Not to men who had a hand in the creation of the wealth that led to the endowment of, or as a use of that wealth for what we would call public purposes.
It was a subversion of the original intent then.
Oh, yeah, completely so. And that we got into the world traditionally of bankers and lawyers.
How do you see that the purpose and direction of the major foundations has changed over the years to the present? What is it today?
Whole 100% behind meeting the cost of education such as it is presented through the schools and colleges of the United States on the subject of our history has proven our original ideas to be no longer practical. The future belongs to a collectivistic concept, and there's just no disagreement on this.
Why do the foundations generously support communist causes in the United States?
Well, because to them, what communism represents a means of developing what we call a monopoly. That is, the organization, we'll say, of large-scale industry into an administrable unit.
Do they think that they will be one of the administrators?
They will be the beneficiaries of it, yes.
One of the best interviews I've ever seen conducted about why America has fallen so far, right? Because people want fair wages and we want to keep inflation down. But we were told that they don't want to hold inflation down and we're not going back to sound banking. And then they will try to influence your children to not believe in sound banking either by taking control of education. I've got 2 books to cover about education. One is The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America by Charlotte Iserby. And also one by John Taylor Gatto, Gatto, about the underground history of American education. One of them German brothers said, if you let him have control of your child and teach your child from the age of 5 till about 12 years old, he said he's got them for the rest of their life. 5 to 12, 7 years. That's all it takes. Especially if you're going to continue to have your child involved in public education. Now, public education and having your child not involved in that, again, is a different subject altogether. Going on about education, I believe the man who said sight words are how we teach our children. Show them a word, tell them what it is, they repeat it to you. I'm going to show that in the epilogue. I believe that man went on to become the father of dyslexia. Now, how does he become the father of dyslexia when trying to tell our children how to read? Right? Is it because he's doing too much? What's this word? Emancipation. And then you flip a few cards that say bird and carrot and notebook, pencil, and you come back to emancipation. And the child is supposed to just tell you what that word says. It's called sight reading. Somebody developed that garbage because he determined that reading sounds, knowing the sounds of letters, singular or plural letters, wasn't the best way to teach children. No sounds, no nothing. Just show them the word. Show it to them. They'll know what it is. It's some of the goofiest garbage I ever heard in my life. But anyway, the epilogue is coming. I'll work on it, piece by piece by piece. In the meanwhile, expect chapters 3 and 4 of the Leipzig Connection before this epilogue is complete. All right. Hey, I'm holla at y'all. Be safe.